And jump back on point here. Matt, I might be reading a little bit too much into this, but in the 2 or 3 minutes we saw Dylan McCaffrey, it looked like Michigan has like a really good rhythm to it. I mean, did you have that same thought or not?
Dylan McCaffrey's still raw to the point where he's not going to be your full-time starter right now. The question is, though, is how bad did Shea Patterson hurt himself with those couple little collapses he had late in the game, especially on the last play where he fumbled it and Notre Dame Coney recovered, and that pretty much sealed the deal. The thing, though, right now you look at for Notre Dame Ball State, and I think where Ball State's going to get hurt is their secondary. They're undersized, lack athleticism, and I think because you got those tall receivers in Boykin and Claypool, watch for something you did not see much in the Notre Dame-Michigan game, and that is for Wimbush to put up the long ball and see if he can take advantage of that size and athleticism that Claypool and Boykins have, and possibly even Chris Fink against this Ball State secondary that was one of the worst in the MAC last year.
What happened to Alizé Mack? To me, he disappeared. I don't remember seeing him much in that game at all. That's another 6'4" tight end, but basically another 6'4" receiver. So is there any word on him? It was just game plan.
From what I saw with him is he's still having a problem with drops. He had a couple plays where he could have made a big catch, and he just flat out dropped the ball. That's where I think he is losing playing time right now, is if he had a better set of hands, I think he would be another one of these tight end U stars that Notre Dame keeps producing at that tight end spot. The problem is too many drops, and it caught him in trouble again this past weekend against Michigan.
All right, Matt, and we'll wrap up Notre Dame Michigan here, but I just wanted your thoughts on Jim Harbaugh and like the state of the program, I guess, for Michigan.
I don't think he's on the hot seat. The problem is if you are thinking about making a change, remember, it's still early in the run. He still has a ton of money on that contract, so do you really want to buy out that kind of money at this point? So I know things are getting restless there, but I think there is more negative to trying to buy him out than sticking with what you got and waiting down the road maybe another year or two. Because if you try to get rid of him now, you're going to be coughing up a ton of money, not just to get rid of him, but also to find a successor. So the question is, do you really want to do that at this point? And I think that's the groupthink that Michigan's going to have right now, especially if things continue to flatline a little bit as this season wears on.
Yeah, I actually agree with you there.
No, I'm just going to say I agree with that, Rick, as well. The thing about it is sometimes you look at it, is it who are you going to get that's any better? Are you going to be able to get a coach that's any better? Or are you just going to stay at status quo? So that's a valid point that Matt makes. And the president went on Twitter this week and said that Jim Harbaugh is not on the hot seat. But we also know how quick that can change in college football.
Well, you look at the last the 40-game comparison with him and Brady Hoke. Harbaugh has one more win than Brady Hoke did in his first 40 games. That was probably the most intriguing game of the week. The biggest game of the week actually is Auburn-Washington. I know all the talk has been Notre Dame Michigan. Since that game Saturday, but Auburn-Washington, Matt, I thought that was a heck of a game, and I actually have Auburn in my top 4 at the end of the year. But a win like that in Atlanta for Auburn, I don't think, and I'd like to get your opinion on it, I don't think that kills Washington's chances at all to actually just win out and could probably still make the playoffs.
Washington, I think the question is now is can they seal the deal in enemy territory? Do they have to continue to rely on Husky Stadium to get the job done? Because they still have several key games away from Husky Stadium where they're going to have to show up and get the job done. So that creates a little bit of indecision as far as where they are going to be for the next rest of the season anytime a big game comes up and it's not in Seattle.
And, Tom, what are your thoughts on that Auburn-Washington game? Because I think Washington, to me, showed enough that they can still probably win out. It just depends how all the teams above them, now that they have that one loss, they drop down to 9th, how the rest of the other teams play out. But I still think Washington has a pretty solid chance of getting into the top 4.
Well, here's the thing, and I'm kind of inclined to think when you rank a team and you're the only 0-1 team in the top 10, By rights, if you just look at wins and losses, Washington should be ranked number 18. So Washington's a very good team. Auburn's a few spots ahead of them. I do not agree with the fact, though, if you're going to put them in the top 10, make them number 10. They are the only team in the top 10 that's 0-1. And I know we talked a little bit about Penn State in that Appalachian game. I get that, and I understand that the differences in the strength of schedules between those two may have something to do with it. But I do not agree with Washington being 0-1 and ranked number 9. But I do agree that they'll find a spot in the top 4. I think there is that opportunity. But there again, as we said many times, the college football Final Four and championship is designed for the SEC and teams in the South.
The Silver Bowl, I think that's going to be the one that wipes out Washington, is that Apple Cup game against Mike Leach at Washington State. I just have a feeling that game is not going to go the Huskies' way if it comes down to that Apple Cup game as to whether or not they are not only in the Pac-10 championship game, but also a chance to make the playoff. I just don't see them getting past Mike Leach and the Cougars.
I worry about them against Stanford because they can't get past Stanford the past couple of years. So that's always been the game that I see they have struggled with it every year. Stanford likes to beat them up and slow them down a little bit, and it takes Washington out of their rhythm, kind of like it's hard to gauge really good teams the first week. But it's kind of what the Auburn's play style is. It's just to bruise them and run the ball at the middle on them, and that slowed Washington down too, even though it was a really close game. But I think, Matt, that Stanford game is one that I'm leaning towards Stanford's probably going to win that game too.
I think the fact that game, though, is in Seattle, that may save Washington. But I think it's the road games, Oregon potentially, and Washington State, where are the potential danger spots for Washington as far as having their chances wiped out as far as making the playoff.
And Tom, for me, the big surprise game of the weekend was LSU-Miami. I mean, the Shrimp Bowl captain, the Cajun Cookie Monster, got it done in a big way against Miami. I lost train of thought. I'm sorry. What are your thoughts on that LSU-Miami game?
Well, the thing about it is, it was certainly not the game that I expected. I thought that LSU would fall to Miami. It was at Miami, so maybe we could blame it on a real hurricane that was nowhere near them. But, hey, you never know. I don't know what happened. I watched that game briefly. Of course, I was shifting around between other games, but I have a real problem with what I saw from Miami. So if what we saw from Miami is a reading of the tea leaves, if you will, of the 2018 season, we totally underestimated them and bought into the media hype of the kind of team that they are. So let's hope they turn it around. But I was less than impressed with them this weekend.
And, Matt, I think this game right here is exactly why Mark Richt lost his job at Georgia, because he has a game or two every single year where he doesn't have his team prepared, it seems like. They just don't show up for a game, and maybe this is that one game coming right out of the gate, week one, and maybe that's a good thing for Miami. But I just think that this is just one of those games, the reason why Mark Richt was fired at Georgia.
Well, again, consider Miami had the element of surprise in their favor last year. That's part of the reason they crept up on people and caught them by surprise, hence Notre Dame 41-8 and all that stuff. Now that they are among one of the focuses, that element of surprise is gone, and sometimes that can be an Achilles heel, and I think it showed up. But I got to say, for LSU, you talk about a guy that's on the hot seat, Ed Orgeron. He really needed a game like this, because I think if you mention the name that is on the biggest hook to possibly be out the chopping block at this point, I think it wasn't Jim Harbaugh's name that was on that list. It was definitely Ed Orgeron's. And for now, he's got a reprieve, but he's still got to keep it up. There's still some big games left on the schedule. But for now, Ed Orgeron has given himself a little bit of a greener pasture in terms of keeping his job for at least one more year.
And, Tom, what does this win do for LSU as far as the SEC is concerned? Do you think they are a competitive team this year in the SEC?
I hope not, because I want to continue my conversation about Lane Kiffin. But I saw two different things that might make the fans of Lane Kiffin be quiet. We saw LSU have a great win against Miami. We saw Lane Kiffin's team just totally get buried and played like nobody's business. So at this moment, I'm just going to pause the Lane Kiffin train. Again, going back to what I saw, LSU was either that good or Miami was that bad, and I still want to believe that Miami was that bad and LSU was LSU.
You know, Tom, me and you had this conversation a few days ago about Lane Kiffin, how you think he deserves another chance at a big-time program, big job, and I don't really think so, because he's had his chance with the Raiders, at Tennessee, USC, all of those failed. So even if he does great at FAU, and he will, because I know they play one or two games against teams like Oklahoma, but he'll dominate the rest of his games probably. He'll be a 10-win coach again this year. But I'm just not on board with that. He deserves another shot, even though he does great at FAU. I mean, Tom, let's get your thoughts on that first.
Well, let me ask you this off question. It has nothing to do with the top 10 that we ranked, but Lovie Smith turned out to get a win with Illinois, the Illinois Fighting Illini, the Big Ten school. They get a win, barely noticeable. Lovie Smith falls from being a Super Bowl coach to being a coach of a Big Ten college program that nobody seems to matter. He gets a win. Lane Kiffin gets a loss. And now the conversation, just after one win, people are talking about Lovie Smith again like they did in years past. So maybe the question is more about, what have you done for me lately? Because I guarantee you, if Lane and Lovie both had gotten a win, we'd be talking more about Lane Kiffin than we are about Lovie Smith. And I'm not talking about Lovie Smith. I'm talking about on the national scale.
Right.
Hold that thought on Lovie Smith till Illinois rips the Purdue cannon away from Purdue. Until that happens, I'm not buying it just yet.
I'm not buying Herm Edwards either after one win at Arizona State. I mean, but Matt, Lane Kiffin, do you think he deserves another shot at a big program?
I don't know if you guys listened to, I think it was last Thursday when he was on the Dan Patrick Show and saying he really didn't have a chance against Oklahoma. That bothered me a bit. I think right now when you're coming in and admitting that on a national television or radio show, whatever you want to call it, that doesn't look good. And I got to say, yeah, the chances were against them, but if you're coming in with that kind of attitude as far as that and you're making it public like he did, that's not a good thing. And I have to say, that's the one thing there about Lane that's got me a little bit irked, just a little bit. I mean, yes, you don't have much of a chance to win that game, but the fact that you say it on national radio, maybe that's what led to the 63-14 loss. Who knows?
Hey, Rick, real quickly, when we're talking about coaches, remember what I told you all along. There's only one school in Southern California, and that's USC. Look at what UCLA did. Look at what Chip Kelly did. Absolutely nothing. And he faces Oklahoma this coming up week. If Oklahoma manages to beat UCLA, we're going to be talking about Oklahoma on Wednesday night.
Oh, well,
for what it's worth.
Oklahoma's going to destroy UCLA. Here's the thing that I'll give Chip Kelly a pass on this year is UCLA is really young, and he's trying to have Wilton Speight run his offense, that is not going to work. I'm sorry. I mean, Wilton Speight couldn't even cut it at Michigan, in a pro-style offense, and he's definitely not a scrambling-type quarterback, like Chip Kelly likes to run that offense. So it's probably going to be another 63-14 win again. For Oklahoma, and Oklahoma looks great with Kyler Murray. I mean, they really do. But to think that this is going to be somewhat of a game against UCLA is going to be way wrong because Chip Kelly's team is really young. He does not have anything for a quarterback, and he can't even run his offense that he wants to run until he gets his style of players, Matt.
And like we said on the preview show, Oklahoma really does not have a test until maybe we get to talking TCU on October 20th, because I think the Red River Shootout, Texas with Tom